The day I disappeared from my family, my niece had just turned 13. She was grinning ear to ear as she peeled the plastic off her brand new expensive phone, the one I'd bought her. Suddenly, without a second thought, she blurted out, "Mom says if you disappear tomorrow, no one would even notice." Everyone, 30 people packed into the living room, burst out laughing. Everyone except me. I just nodded, but inside something snapped. In that moment, I realized, to them, I wasn't a person. I was just a wallet, a walking ATM, the one who always paid, always fixed, always rescued. My sister didn't even look up from her phone. My mom pretended not to hear, but I saw her shoulders lift in silent agreement. My dad raised his beer and said, "Well, she's not wrong." I stood there, feeling like a ghost. I'd always been the one who paid, who fixed things, who saved the day, but I was never truly valued. "Thanks for the phone, Uncle," my niece chirped, already glued to her screen. My heart was pounding, my face burning. The room felt smaller, the air heavier, but I didn't say a word. I just nodded, because that's what I always did. I nodded, smiled, pretended. Lindsay, my sister, finally looked up and met my eyes. I saw it. A flicker of amusement, of satisfaction, like she'd been waiting for this moment, for me to just stand there, humiliated. "All right, everyone, let's cut the cake." Mom's voice rang out, bright and cheerful, sweeping away the tension. But the taste of it lingered, bitter and thick. I moved to the kitchen, leaning against the counter as they gathered around the table. Candles were lit. Wishes were made, and I just watched, my hands curling into fists. Somewhere beneath the hurt, something colder began to bloom. I felt my phone in my pocket. Just two taps, two quick taps, and every bill, every subscription, every credit line I'd set up for them, for Lindsay, for Mom, for Dad, they all vanished. My fingers moved without hesitation, like muscle memory. A decision I didn't even know I was making until it was done. Gone, just like that. The voices blurred into a distant hum. The room swayed around me, a sea of familiar faces that suddenly felt like strangers. They laughed, they cheered, they celebrated, and I wasn't really there. I was a ghost with a wallet, but not anymore. I slipped out without saying goodbye. No one noticed. Of course they didn't. The one thing my niece got right that night. I didn't go home. I went straight to my apartment, packed a few essentials into a small travel bag, and then turned back. The black backpack was old, almost forgotten in the corner of my closet, but tonight it had a purpose. I filled it, not with my things, not with anything they would expect, and then I returned. The house was still a noisy mess. No one noticed me slip in, walk down the hallway, and leave the backpack beside the stairs. And then I was gone. Really gone. By the time they noticed, I would be just a shadow. But inside that backpack, let them find it. Let them try to understand. The silence didn't last long. I expected panic, anger, but what I got was an explosion. It started the next morning. I woke up to the sound of pounding on my apartment door. No phone calls, no polite knocks, just fists hammering against the wood. "Open up! You think you can just do this?" Dad's voice, loud and furious. I stayed quiet, watching the door shake as if it might come off its hinges. "I know you're in there. You think you're smart? You think you're better than us?" His voice cracked, not just with rage, but with something else. Fear. I stayed silent. I wasn't playing this game. Eventually, the pounding stopped. I heard his heavy footsteps retreat, a muffled curse, the slam of his car door, but it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed. A text from Mom. "How could you do this to your own family?" I didn't reply. An hour later, Lindsay tried. This time it was a call. I watched her name flash on the screen and let it ring. Then another. And another. 6 calls in a row. Finally, a message. "You think you're so clever? You think we can't live without you? Fine. See how long you last without a family." I read it and smiled. Was that supposed to be a threat or a promise? But the real storm came that evening. I was just stepping out of the shower when I heard the sound of a key in the lock. I froze. No one should have a key to my place. No one except... The door burst open. Dad stormed in, red-faced, sweat beading on his forehead. Mom right behind him, her eyes wide and frantic. "You think you can just lock me out?" Dad bellowed. "Get out!" I said, my voice calm but cold. "Get out! Get out! This is what you've become?" Mom's voice was shrill, almost hysterical. "Abandoning your own family?" "You used me," I corrected, leaning against the kitchen counter, still drying my hair. "There's a difference." Dad stepped closer, his fist clenched. "You ungrateful little troublemaker. Try it." The words were out before I even thought. Calm, solid, a challenge. His hand trembled, but it didn't move. We both knew the truth. He wasn't a fighter, never was. He was a bully who hid behind words, who shouted to hide his own fear. What did you do? Mom's voice broke. The cards don't work. Lindsay can't pay her bills. The mortgage, it's all gone. That's right, I nodded. Everything I paid for, everything I managed, it's over. Dad laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. Oh, you think you're so powerful? You think we need you? Seems like you do, I shrugged. Since you broke into my apartment just to beg. Beg? He snarled. You think we're begging? You think... Enough, I snapped, the words slicing through his tirade. Enough. I'm done. Mom stepped forward, her hands outstretched. Please, this is your family. We're all we have. All you have, I corrected. I'm done being your safety net, your bank, your doormat. Dad's face twisted. You little pest? I raised a finger. Get out. Now. You can't do this, Mom whispered, tears welling up. This is cruel. I laughed. Cruel is telling your son he's worthless while spending his money. Cruel is using me like a tool and laughing behind my back. Dad stepped forward again, but I didn't flinch. This time, he stopped. His shoulders slumped. You'll regret this, he muttered. You'll come crawling back. I won't, I said, my voice like steel. They left, slamming the door behind them. But as I listened to their footsteps fade, I knew this wasn't the end. The next day, they tried another tactic. Lindsay showed up at my office. I saw her through the glass. Her face pale, eyes puffy from crying. My boss looked confused, then uncomfortable as she began waving at me. I stayed at my desk. Sir, there's a woman here. She's nobody, I said, not even looking up, but she didn't leave. I watched her talking to the receptionist, her voice rising, her hands shaking. Then security stepped in, guiding her out. I knew she'd be back. That night, another knock. My landlord. There's a bit of a situation. Your family is downstairs making a scene. Tell them to leave or I'll call the police. He blinked. But it's your family. No, I corrected. Not anymore. I watched through the window as they stood there, shouting, waving their arms, until finally security escorted them away. But I knew them. I knew their persistence. And I knew that somewhere in that house I left behind, there was a black backpack waiting for them to open, to understand just how far I was willing to go. The silence didn't last long. I knew them too well. Silence was just the calm before the storm. For days, I ignored their calls, their texts, their desperate voicemails. I even skipped work, letting the world fall away while I enjoyed the quiet. But I wasn't naive. I knew they wouldn't give up. It started with Lindsay's tantrums. Messages full of venom, blaming me for everything. Mom's tearful voicemails followed, her voice breaking as she begged me to be the bigger person and save the family. And then came Dad. At first it was rage threats, insults, the usual noise. But then his tone changed. Calm, calculated, an invitation. Son, let's settle this like men. No drama, just you and me. There's a game this weekend. Our team's playing. Come, let's talk it out. A setup. I felt it in my bones, but I agreed. I wanted this. So, I went. When I saw the empty seats around him and the black backpack clutched in his hands, I knew I was right. They didn't want peace. They wanted control. But I wasn't the same fool who'd stood in that living room, nodding and smiling. Not anymore. The stadium roared like a living beast, cheers, screams, the pounding of feet on metal bleachers. It was chaos. A perfect place for secrets to drown. Dad was waiting in Section 12, Row F. The seats around him empty despite the game being packed. He spotted me instantly, waving with one hand, the other gripping the black backpack, my backpack. I walked down the steps, each stride steady, my eyes locked on him. He looked excited, a twisted smile curled on his lips like he thought he'd won something. Surprised I called you, he shouted over the noise, patting the seat next to him. Finally decided to talk like men, huh? Talk? I settled into the seat, my gaze never leaving the backpack in his lap. Is that what this is? Oh, I think it's a bit more than that. He leaned in, his voice dropping, barely louder than a whisper. You thought you were so smart, huh? Running away, cutting us off, but you left a little present behind. His fingers drummed against the backpack. We found this, and guess what, genius? We know. Know what? I asked, keeping my voice as calm as the cold wind that swept across the field. Your secrets, your lies. You think you're clean, that you're better than us? His voice sharpened. You've been hiding things.